In the 13th century, the Italian peninsula was an arena of powers, slowly strangling one another. To the south, the Papal States extended their reach wherever the Catholic faith took root. Spanish dynasties clung to the bottom of the boot. And in the north, small but fierce republics fought, not only against each other, but against the hunger for power festering within their own walls. Florence was the most ambitious of them all. Rising along the banks of the Arno River, this city was determined to become the beating heart of Italy. Cloth looms ran day and night, trade guilds shaped politics from the shadows, and bankers, quiet, calculating, patient, built invisible empires from behind their ledgers. The city was governed by a council of 9, who theoretically served the people. But in practice, power did not belong to the council. It belonged to whoever decided who sat on it. And walking the streets of Florence, among those who understood this truth most clearly, was a small, modest, and deeply calculating family, the Medici. The Medici did not begin in glory. In the 13th century, they were a simple Tuscan family from the Mugello Valley, north of Florence. The earliest records place them there in 1230. No titles, no coat of arms that meant anything, no great legacy to speak of. What they had was ambition and patience. As Florence grew, so did they. They moved into the city, embedded themselves in the guild system, and climbed slowly, deliberately, without drawing unnecessary attention. In 1371, Salvestro de' Medici rose to the position of gonfaloniere, the city's chief justice. His first move was to pass laws weakening the grip of the old nobility. It wasn't revolution, it was strategy, a carefully placed stone on a long road. But the family's defining leap came with one man, Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici. Giovanni inherited less than he deserved. Rather than protest, he turned it into fuel. He built wool workshops, cultivated guild connections, and in 1390 founded the Medici Bank. Within years, its branches stretched across Europe, from Florence to Rome, from Rome to beyond. Giovanni's greatest weapon, however, was not his wealth. It was his humility. He did not build palaces. He did not throw lavish banquets. He walked among ordinary people and presented himself as one of them. It was image management centuries before the term existed, and it worked. Florence loved the Medici because the Medici had chosen very deliberately to be lovable. Giovanni's son, Cosimo de Bicci, inherited his father's foundation and built an empire upon it. The bank expanded across the continent. Pope John the 23rd was among his clients. Venice, Milan, London. Medici money was everywhere. But in Florence, another force was watching. The Albizzi family, old, proud, and deeply unsettled by the Medici rise. In 1433, they made their move. The Albizzi seized a majority in the Signoria and accused Cosimo of conspiracy, of plotting to take control of the Republic. The evidence was thin. The intention was transparent. Cosimo was arrested. A death sentence was on the table. But Cosimo was a man with resources. He did not bribe the guards. He did not attempt escape. Instead, he talked. He quietly persuaded a key member of the Signoria to commute his sentence from death to exile. He was sent to Venice. For now, the exile lasted 1 year. New elections swept Medici allies into power. When Cosimo returned to Florence, it was the Albizzi who were forced to leave. This was how power changed hands in Renaissance Italy, not by the sword, but by the vote. And the vote, more often than not, could be purchased. When Cosimo died in 1462, Florence granted him the title Pater Patriae, Father of the Fatherland. His son Piero followed, brief, exhausted, politically limited. He was a man managing a legacy too large for his failing health. The true star was Piero's son, Lorenzo de Medici. Born in 1449, Lorenzo seemed almost designed for the role. His mother raised him on poetry. His father sat him at the tables of diplomats. He studied Greek philosophy under Byzantine scholars, wrote verse in Latin, rode into tournaments, and debated theology with the finest minds in Europe. Il Magnifico, the Magnificent. He earned the name. Under his leadership, Florence became the cultural capital of the Western world. Botticelli painted masterpieces under his patronage. Michelangelo shaped marble in his courtyard. Marsilio Ficino founded the Platonic Academy. And a young Florentine official named Niccolo Machiavelli watched everything carefully and would one day write it all down. But standing at the peak of Florence meant making enemies, and the enemies were already sharpening their blades. April 26th, 1478, a Sunday morning. The cathedral was full. The Pazzi family, backed in the shadows by Pope Sixtus IV, had spent years constructing their plan. The Medici had grown too powerful, too connected, too untouchable. The solution, they decided, was simple. Remove them, both of them, in the house of God. As the priest raised the host, the assassins moved. Lorenzo's brother, Giuliano, was struck repeatedly. He fell on the marble floor in a pool of blood. Lorenzo, wounded, fought his way to safety. His allies surrounded him. The doors were sealed, but the attack was only the beginning. Pope Sixtus excommunicated Lorenzo and joined forces with Naples, launching a military campaign against Florence. The city was encircled. Its future looked uncertain. Yet Florence did something unexpected. The people stood with Lorenzo. The assassination attempt had not weakened him. It had made him a martyr. Lorenzo sailed to Naples. He sat across from King Ferrante, a man known for his brutality, and negotiated peace face to face. When he returned, Florence received him as a hero. The Pazzi conspirators were hunted down. Several were executed. The family name was erased from public records. Lorenzo was still standing, bloodied but standing. When Lorenzo died in 1492, Florence lost its center of gravity. The Medici Bank was already fracturing. Mismanagement, overspending, and shifting trade routes had quietly hollowed it out. Into that void, a voice rose. Girolamo Savonarola, the Dominican friar, thundered from the pulpit that Florence had lost its soul. Renaissance art, vanity, luxury, damnation, the Medici, the plague upon God's city. The people listened because the people were exhausted. Taxes were suffocating. Wars had no end. And this fire and brimstone preacher gave their frustration a shape and a target. In 1494, the French King Charles VIII invaded Italy. Lorenzo's son Piero surrendered at terms so humiliating that the streets of Florence erupted in rage. Savonarola seized the moment. The Medici were expelled from the city. In 1497, a great fire was lit in the Piazza della Signoria, the bonfire of the Vanities. Mirrors, masks, books of poetry, paintings that had taken lifetimes to create, an entire century of cultural achievement turned to ash in an afternoon. But Savonarola's time was already running out. Pope Alexander VI excommunicated him. His power evaporated. In 1498, in that very same piazza, Savonarola was hanged and then burned. Florence had devoured its own prophet, and the Medici were already planning their return. In 1512, the Medici returned to Florence, not as the cautious, modest family of Giovanni di Bicci, but harder, more calculated, with the full weight of papal backing behind them. Pope Clement VII, himself a Medici, granted the family the title of Duke of Florence. The Republic was finished, and when Cosimo I became Grand Duke of Tuscany in 1569, the Medici were no longer merely a powerful family. They were a state. Their reach extended far beyond Italy. Catherine de' Medici became Queen of France, navigating the bloody corridors of French politics through wars of religion, including the catastrophic St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572. Maria de' Medici served as regent of France, wielding power in the name of a child king. 2 Medici became popes: Leo X, a lavish patron of the arts who left the Vatican nearly bankrupt, and Clement VII, who watched in helpless horror as the armies of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V sacked Rome in 1527, reducing the Eternal City to rubble. Power, it turned out, had always carried a price. Centuries passed. The power slowly contracted. The wealth thinned. By the early 18th century, the Medici were a name more than a force, a dynasty surviving on legacy and memory. In 1737, the last male heir, Gian Gastone, died without a successor. The line was broken, but one Medici remained. His sister, Anna Maria Luisa, made a final decision, perhaps the most consequential of all. Through a legal agreement known as the Family Pact, she ensured that the entire Medici collection, the paintings, the sculptures, the manuscripts, the jewels, would remain in Florence forever, not sold, not scattered, not shipped to foreign courts, given to the city. It is because of her that the Uffizi Gallery exists as it does today. Every Botticelli, every Raphael, every Michelangelo you see behind those walls, they are there because of one woman's final act of devotion to a city her family had shaped for centuries. The Medici were not saints. They were not villains. They were something more complicated and more human than either. They were bankers who became dukes, patrons who built cathedrals, survivors who outlasted popes, kings, and prophets. And they were, in the end, a family, with all the ambition, betrayal, love, and grief that word implies. Florence still carries their fingerprints in the curve of every dome, in the silence of every gallery, in the stones beneath your feet as you cross the Ponte Vecchio on a winter evening. The Medici are gone, but Florence, their Florence, endures.